Alright, hi everyone, I'm Mark with Macroscopic Solutions. What we're going to be going over right now is how to set up and use the Macropod MacroBox system. So there's going to be a couple of different ways that you can actually configure the system. A lot of the parts here and the components are off the shelf. In that case, it also allows us to keep the system pretty modular, which is fantastic because if you have one type of sample that's really heavy versus another type of sample that's really light, or if you just want to reconfigure everything in order to actually get the perfect image or the perfect setup or the perfect motion control, you're able to do that. So what I'm going to do now is walk you through a couple of the configurations. There's two that are going to be most commonly used. The first one is what I would suggest is actually the least common method. What it's going to allow you to do is raise your sample up and down. That way, if you have, let's say, a really small table, and rather than occupying a large table space, you might be able to get the system a little bit more compact in that first configuration. The second configuration, which is actually going to be a follow-up video, I'm not going to do both configurations in one video. I'll do the second one in its own video following this one, is actually what I would prefer most of the users set the system up as. The system in general is going to be more stable, the lighting is going to be better, the camera is going to have less wobble on it, and everything should be bolted just much more tightly. So you're going to be producing better images, getting better results, and there's little to no consequences of the system falling out of place. So let's just jump right on into this. We're going to start installing in front of me. I have the Allen key set that came along with everybody's system. I also have a flathead screwdriver. This does not come with the system, but I'm assuming mostly everybody has a flathead. You don't actually need this for the install, but what I usually recommend is that when you go to mount a lens, just make sure that the foot plate on the lens is tightened fully. It's just a good extra precautionary measure, so it's sometimes good to have a flathead screwdriver for that purpose. Some of those bolts are also Allen driven, so the Allens that you have will also do the trick. Okay, so first thing I'm going to do is I'm just going to get the y-axis, the z-axis out of the way. The y-axis, which is basically going to be where our controls are going to be situated, we're going to orient this in the preferred orientation that we're going to need. So also know that I'm setting this up in a little bit of an awkward fashion. I'm going to make the system so that it is facing the camera. Ordinarily, if I were setting this up in a lab environment or for my own use, I would actually set the y-axis so that everything is facing me, so that way I can access the controls. So just understand there's going to be a little bit of awkwardness at times when I have to reach across the center, but that's just so that you can see what it is that I want you to see. Okay, so first thing from here, I just want to mention that you have the option in configuration 1 to actually bolt this down to the table. If you can, that's terrific. It's going to cut down on vibrations, it's going to stabilize the system. That's really good. So what all you'd have to do in that regard is basically there's a couple of screws that I provide. You can just go through the center points here and make sure that you put something beneath it because you don't want to like drive the screws in and accidentally bend the y-axis. You want to have a couple of spacers under there. So I do provide a couple. That's these here. So what you can do is you'll slide these under, they'll lock, and you'll take the little drive screws. They're driven by a 3/16 Allen, and you'll just thread them in flat and flush. You're also going to have another piece of leveling equipment underneath because what I refer to as the yoke is going to basically sit underneath the y-axis as well. Now, if this is all bolted down to the ground, if you see on here, I actually have 4 heightening screws. So these are here. You do not need these. You can actually take these screws completely out if you're in a configuration where you're bolted down to the table. But today we're not going to be bolted to the table. So these screws are going to be in here, and I'll show you how they're used shortly. Okay, so I'm going to place these to the side. Now, when I went over the what's in the box video, I wasn't exactly sure how stable the system was going to be yet, so I have decided to include a total of 3 tripods with the kit. 2 are going to be for stabilizing the y-axis, while the third is going to be for stabilizing the z-axis. So let's grab those tripods. It's going to be the first things that we're going to work with. These are the two tripods. They're going to come shipped this way. They have a height adjustment, which we're going to use in the second configuration. We're not going to use those now. Each of these tripods is fitted with a 3/8 20 screw. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to grab a 3mm. Let me see if I can bring this just a little bit closer. In here is a locking Allen. So I'm going to loosen that locking Allen. I'm going to do this on both. So I'm going to grab this one now, loosen that screw, bring it nice and close to the camera so you can see, but it's basically this. Oh, let's bring it in focus. It should autofocus, I'm sorry it isn't, but basically it's that screw right there. Okay, so what that allows me to do now is twist this mechanism, which is automatically going to drive the 3/8 bolt out of there. It automatically unthreads it by me twisting it. And I'm going to flip it around. So when I flip it around, now I have actually accessed the 1/4 thread. I'm going to tighten it back up. Same way, just tighten that. Now I've just driven that screw down. I've basically resized it. And now I'm going to take that Allen and I'm just going to tighten up that lock. Not too tight, you don't want to strip anything, but tight enough so that it's snug. Okay, same process. We're just going to twist, flip, install, tighten, and then we're going to tighten that bolt snug. Okay. Now on the bottom of everybody's y-axis is actually a 1/4" thread. First thing I'm just going to recommend everybody do is, to get a little bit more clearance, go ahead and you can open up all 3 legs so that you're situated at 90 degrees. That's what gives you the added stability that we're going to need for this system. So I'm going to click all these out, open all the legs up to 90 degrees, make sure everything is tight, all my legs are tight. And now what we're going to do is just sort of lift, and we're going to thread the 1/4 tripod directly into a slot, which is in the center plate on the edge of each of the slider system. Okay, so all I'm going to do is make sure it's really snug. And you can see when I make it snug, the tripod's actually nice and symmetrical. You can see how the legs are actually situating out wide. Same thing, just going to move to the other side. We're going to tighten down over there. I can gently slide the carriage out of the way if it's not giving you enough clearance. And now what we can do is actually quick it up if we wanted, but in most cases, this is actually going to be perfect, just leaving it flat like that. Okay, the next thing we want to do, we want to take our 3/16 Allen and we want to assemble the yoke. So we're going to grab 2 of our bolts, push the carriage off to the side. And if you remember, I have these bolts down here. So these bolts are for height. So right now they're set, so where this is actually going to sit pretty flush on the table. So that's just their height adjustments. Okay, the yoke's now assembled. I'm going to move the Allens off to the side. We're not going to need these anymore. And the next thing we're going to do is grab our 3rd tripod, which is going to allow us to mount the Z-axis. Okay, so first thing you want to do is loosen up these ball joints. You want to make sure that this is flexible. It's rotating freely when you go ahead and you install. You also want to make sure your adapter clamp is all the way open. So we're going to do the same thing on both. You can see that's nice and loose. That's because this ball joint is loose. We're going to go ahead, we're going to loosen up this adapter as well. So we're going to take Z-axis. We're going to mount the tripod onto this adapter that's already mounted here. You can tighten the adapter clamp, but again, leave the actual ball joint flexible, in a flexible position. Okay, that's nice and tight. So you can see now that my tripod is just sort of hanging. You can also go ahead and open up the feet here. Then what we're going to do is slot the bottommost adapter into the lower adapter. Again, keep the balls free floating. Okay. So you can see the height is actually keeping everything snug. You can see the z-axis is now perpendicular to the y-axis. I'm just going to turn this so it faces the camera better. Looks like it's right about there. There we go. So it looks like it's a little off to the side. That's because my camera itself is actually off to the side. But you can see this is how we're now mounted. So let's say that you have something that's quite heavy and you're putting that on the carriage here, where you want the camera on the boom to kind of come up tall and then branch out. You want the system oriented in a very low profile, something similar to this. If you're satisfied with the angle here, for example, like if you have loose soil, like we're going to have samples at Texas Tech, an angle or a profile like this is going to be much better because the soil can't actually move down gravity. So now what we're going to do, if we're satisfied with that, we're going to go ahead, we're going to clamp up both of those ball valves. However, let's say that your boxes or your specimens are insect boxes. In that situation, you're actually going to want to tip this system up higher. The reason for that is because you don't want the camera over top really sensitive, delicate specimens. You want to protect those specimens. So in that situation, we can actually tip the entire system more vertical and have the camera so that it's actually out towards the rear a bit more. That way, you're never putting your samples at risk of the camera falling on top of delicate samples. So I'll show you how to do that now. On the tripod, there's a little tightening bracket. You want to loosen these ball joints again. And now what we can do is slide our tripod up. So that's about a 45-degree angle if I want to tighten it that way. And I can also extend the legs a bit more on the bottom side of the tripod if I wanted more height. But just know that you can actually change and modify the height on here as many times as you need. It's really quite nice. Also, if you're in a vertical orientation such as this one, you want to make sure that the tool holder cable is installed. That way you're going to have seamless up and down motion whenever you're driving that axis. Okay. So to make this easier on myself as well, I'm going to push this carriage on the y-axis over to the other side where I'm going to be. And now we're going to begin to assemble our camera. So to assemble the camera, you essentially have two boomsticks. The boomstick that's going to be on the bottom is going to be denoted by the fact that there's going to be two ball valves on it. The boomstick that's going to be holding the camera, or the stack shot, has one ball valve on it. Okay, so it's very important. You can also find that the Go9 cable tie is also found on the back. This joint needs to be at a full 90-degree position. What I mean by that is if we're at 0 degrees, basically the ball joint means that this arm is going to be coming straight up, just like this. But we want to actually move it so that it's at full 90 degrees. The reason why this particular ball joint needs to be at 90 degrees is because when we extend out our boom and we install our stack shot in our camera, you're going to have a ton of weight on this joint specifically. So in order to just make sure that there's not going to be any drooping, just make sure that this joint maintains at 90 degrees at all times. So it's actually going to come shipped at 90 degrees, and in fact, when we use it in the second configuration, this is also going to remain at 90 degrees. So you pretty much don't have to move that at all. When you install the base boom, you're going to just tighten it onto the adapter. So you can see it's there now. Because this is at 90 degrees, we can't have our camera down here when the stage is up there in the middle. So what you have to do is take this ball joint, and we're going to tilt it back at about a 45-degree angle. And that 45-degree angle is going to help spread out the weight across this axis. It's also going to make it much more stable. And now what we can do is go ahead and we can install the second boomstick. and we'll just tighten that down on the adapter. So you can see now, that's basically the foundation that's going to be holding your imaging equipment. From here, now you can go ahead, you can install your stack shot. Now the stack shot, the servo motor is going to be at the rear. So right now, this servo is actually going to be facing you as the operator, or facing the camera. The front is the opposite side of the servo. Go ahead, we'll tighten that on in place. The other thing you want to make sure is that when you have your box on here and your sample, the camera only needs to come halfway up the y-axis. It does not need to go any higher than that. The reason is because we're going to be doing a full-on scan of the box. So even though this is 1 meter long, we're only going to be able to have about 1/2 meter of travel. So what you actually need to do is actually position the stage so that you're scanning the top of the box, which is going to be at midpoint, and then we're going to be slowly pulling the box up as we scan until eventually the camera stays in that fixed horizontal position at the midpoint, and then we're then scanning the bottom of the box. So I just want to make sure that's clear for everybody. So now what we can do is we can take our boom and we can adjust it so that it's at approximately that midpoint. Just know that the further you pull this out, the more wobbly the system's going to be. The more you actually have this down set, the stiffer it's going to be. So sometimes it's actually good to tighten this up. Don't pull it out that far. But then you can use the angle. So now I can actually spin the ball valve on the stack shot, move the stack shot forward and backward, up and down like this. I can also continue to move this ball joint, and I can continue to adjust the flex here. So you can see that's in a pretty good position. The only thing that's left is you just want to make sure that your camera is completely perpendicular to where the z-axis is situated. And this you can either eyeball, or there are actually numbers on each ball joint. You can actually take a look over here and see what angle you're positioned at, match the angle on here. But obviously you have 3 different angles you need to work with. So this actually looks like we're in a position where we're at midpoint, which is great. The next thing you can do is mount your lens. Now, I spoke about having a flathead screwdriver. The purpose is so that I can actually tighten this bolt. I just want to make sure that this foot plate is not loose so that the lens of the camera can begin to twist on me. I just want to make sure that that's nice and tight. You can also use an Allen to go ahead and tighten that down as well. On the bottom here, I just want to mention there's also a catch screw. You can see it's silver up here at the top. Down below there's no silver, there's no catch screw. The reason for that is so that I can, from the rear, slide this foot plate directly into the adapter on the stack shot, and if I drop this, make a mistake, I can let go of everything, and the catch screw is actually going to catch it while it's still loose. So it's good to take advantage of that catch screw. Okay, just going to tighten that up there. Now I'm just going to go ahead, we're going to add the stack shot. If you want, you can go ahead and power this on. You can go ahead also, we'll connect up our y-axis. That cable's already going to be installed on your y-axis, so just connect that up to the y. You can now take your camera. I already have the battery pack assembled in the camera. We'll ship that way. I'm going to take off the lens caps very, very slowly and very gently, without moving the camera too far or too quickly. I don't want to capture dust inside my camera sensor. We'll go ahead, we're going to mount that. We're going to take our lens covers and just place them over to the side. The flash arms, you want to mount this in an area where the camera is. These adapters you're going to have to install because the flashes are going to include these adapters, but we don't open these flashes. You're going to open them when you receive them. But basically, once you see how they're fit, you just click the button, slide it in, and snap it in place, and that's your flash installed on the flex plate. But the only thing you do want to make sure is that you want to extend this forward because you want the lights to be as close to the front of the lens as possible, facing down towards your sample. Okay, once you've done that, we can go ahead. we can install our diffusers. Diffusers are just really important for really nice balanced lighting. Actually, I think what we'll do is, rather than up there, I think I'd rather just mount it on the stack shot again. It gets really, really good grip on the underside of the stack shot. There you go, so you can see that. Now we're gonna go ahead, we're gonna install our flash transmitter. There's a cover in the top of the DSLR, we'll just remove the cover. Go ahead, we'll slide in that remote. And now the last step is to just link up all the cables. So, what I have here is a USB cable. USB is going to run from the camera over to the computer. And you just want to make sure that these cables are not going to be getting in the way of the axis. So the cables are actually going to run right down behind this back of this ball. And you're just going to begin to tether them. So basically, one at a time, we'll just start with, they actually rotate the tie. And one at a time, we're going to place the cables right through here. We also have, this is our shutter cable. So we're going to take the shutter cable, insert this in the remote portion of the camera. Drag it down. This connects into the 1-2 port on the stack shot. And if you want to coil this up at all, you're welcome to. You can basically tidy up your cables as best you can. Now we're going to connect up our x-axis. So the x-axis is going to connect up here to the stack shot. Likewise, we can run this down however we need. It's probably best to go back through here, but just for the sake of demonstrating how you set this system up, it's okay to just sort of let it hang. It's not in the way of anything, which is good. The last axis to then set up is our z-axis. That's this axis here. That's what's going to be moving our carriage, our actual sample, up and down. So you can see I have a little bit more slack here. You're going to want that slack. There is a tie around here. I'm just going to pop the tie off for now. Yep, and you can see we're going to run the z-axis. You could actually even just run it right through the bolts here. That way it'll kind of keep it out of the way and keep it in dead center. Okay, after that, the last thing to do is to just connect up the AC adapter in the camera. Remember, the AC adapter is found in this Go9 stack. So basically you can just take this out, link this up, plug it into the wall, or you can use the camera's battery if you don't want to deal with the cables. But here now we're actually at a point where we can power on our stack shot. If you want to place a sample up there, what I might do is actually just bring the stack shot back a little bit. So I'm going to press the x-axis. You can see the camera is going to start to move away from where my sample is going to be located. If I have a sample or if I have a box to place, I can actually go ahead and we can mount this. Flash is a little close. So we'll just pull that out of the way. It's also important, if you just want to sort of check and make sure that your camera is aimed parallel, when you do twist lock this boomstick, this does have a little bit of movement until you lock it again. So you just want to make sure that you're twisted into the right place. I can see my camera is actually facing a little bit to the left. So I'm just going to loosen this, twist everything a little bit to the right, tighten it back up, and now I can see I'm nice and parallel and perpendicular. I'm at 90-degree angles to everything, which is nice. Y-axis. This allows me to move my camera into place. You can see the camera itself is at the midpoint. I can actually bring it back a little bit more, give myself a little bit more room. It's actually a little bit high. Again, the lower and closer you get everything, the more stable the whole system is going to be. And in addition, finally, our Z-axis. You can see that we are using, again, the tool holder in order to position our Z-axis into place. So I'll just pull that out, just so everybody knows. So this is configuration A. Totally reasonable way to set up the system. But now what we're going to do is we're going to record a second video, which is actually going to show at least the way that I would prefer most people to use the system, the way that the system was actually intended to be designed. But again, just want to show you the modularity of the system, the flexibility, and that this is a capability. If you really wanted, and let's say you had a really small table space, you could actually put the Z-axis rail on a full 90-degree flat surface so that it's going directly up and down, and the camera off to the rear, which is actually going to bring the whole unit together in a more stable way. Okay, so thank you for watching the first iteration, the first configuration. Stay tuned for that second configuration, and then we'll go ahead and we'll use the systems and demonstrate how to use the systems under both configurations. Again, I'm Mark Smith with Macroscopic Solutions. Thanks for tuning in. Let me know if you have any questions about our MacroBox system.